Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. After enduring 20 years of a widow-like marriage, I unexpectedly got a second chance at life when I was reborn. I found myself in the middle of a heated divorce battle with Sean. The reason? He secretly hired his ex-girlfriend, Jenna Monroe, into his company and even promoted her to the position of CFO against all protocol. That sparked the most intense fight we had ever had. After he slammed the door and left, I went straight to the hospital and terminated my 3-month pregnancy. Now, as I stared at the wall calendar, I realized I had returned to 1988. My head was throbbing and heavy, but I forced myself out of the bedroom. The living room was thick with the smell of cigarettes. Sean was lounging on the couch, legs casually propped up on the coffee table, smoking one cigarette after another. His fingers were enveloped in swirling smoke. Perhaps it was my heightened sensitivity during pregnancy or the years of being subjected to the same smell, but I suddenly felt nauseous. Hearing me retch, Sean turned his head to glance at me, then slowly got up and walked over. His face was as sharp and striking as ever, but despite this, he still didn't extinguish his cigarette. When I finally stopped dry heaving, I rinsed my mouth and looked up at the mirror. The youthful reflection staring back at me left me momentarily stunned. The summer heat in Canton was oppressive, and there wasn't a breeze on the balcony. Sean leaned lazily against the railing, looking as though nothing could bother him. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice calm. "Sean, let's get a divorce tomorrow at 10 a.m. Let's meet at the Civil Affairs office and finalize everything. There's no point in us dragging this out and tormenting each other." Not giving him a chance to respond, I looked down and continued. "I know there's nothing between you and Jenna, but I can't keep arguing over her with you. I refuse to waste the rest of my life on someone who isn't worth it." Sean stayed silent. I raised my head and stared at him, then added coldly, "I'll terminate the pregnancy this afternoon. Let's part ways amicably. Once we're divorced, you're free to be with anyone you want, Jenna or even one of those girls at your company. It's all up to you." Hearing this, Sean finally reacted. His eyes darkened as he studied my face, as though trying to discern something. After a long pause, he flicked the ash off his cigarette and smirked derisively. "Playing hard to get doesn't suit you." I didn't bother to argue. "Fine," I said curtly, picking up my worn-out bag and heading for the door. Seeing that I was serious, Sean grabbed my arm and with a grim expression sneered, "Claire, stop this nonsense. You know there's nothing between me and Jenna. Do you realize how pathetic this little act of yours is? My company is at a critical point right now, and I don't have time to entertain your games. And let's not forget, you have no job, no savings, and now you want to abort my child? Where the hell do you get the nerve?" As if something had just occurred. To him, his eyes filled with suspicion. He scrutinized me as though trying to piece something together. I yanked my arm free and slapped him hard across the face. Smiling bitterly, I said, "Do you know what I hate most about you? Your arrogance, your self-righteousness." In my previous life, Sean had insisted countless times that he and Jenna were clean, but I always treated his words as a joke. I knew the truth. They had been hiding behind the guise of friendship, indulging in ambiguous intimacy, subtle flirtations, a shared glass of wine, accidental touches. Sean was no exception to the thrill of the forbidden. Suppressing my emotions, I took a deep breath and said firmly, "I will divorce you and I don't want this child. For that, I admit I'm cruel, but I refuse to let you ruin me a second time." In my last life, it took me nearly a decade to realize that Sean had never loved me. He pursued me and married me only because of a bruised ego. When Jenna chose the factory manager's son over him, he married me out of spite and as a way to save face among his friends. Back then I was 18, beautiful and confident. I was the darling of the textile factory, bright as a flower, the first girl to wear dresses, heels and big curls to work. I had dreams of a brilliant future. But Sean destroyed all of them after our marriage because I wasn't the woman he truly wanted. Sean never cared about my feelings. At the time I didn't understand this. I thought I could fix things by throwing tantrums and smashing things, but it was pointless. Even when I accidentally saw him with Jenna, nothing changed. After Jenna's divorce, he brought her into his company under the pretense of helping a friend and secretly rented her the factory's welfare apartment meant for us. He called it a rental, but I never saw a penny. Sean catered to Jenna in every way, afraid of even the smallest offense when she was around. He wouldn't even smoke despite his addiction. As his business grew, he took her to high-end events, introduced her to his associates, and helped her expand her connections. No one in his social circle knew I existed. To them, Jenna was his trusted assistant, his confidant. Even on the day I fell down the stairs in my last life, Sean was still at a banquet with her, planning to invest in her new business. To him, I was just a domestic servant, the mother of his child. Jenna, on the other hand, was his equal, his true partner, the woman he wished he had married. Sean often said to me, "You don't understand," his face full of impatience and disdain. "Why can't you be content?" he once snapped. "I take care of you. You don't have to work or endure the humiliation of schmoozing with clients. What more could you possibly want?" I quit my factory job during my first pregnancy because of complications, and under Sean's persuasion, I became a housewife. When the baby came, my life turned into a never-ending grind. I lost handfuls of hair, barely slept, and was constantly exhausted. But to Sean, all of that was my duty. He saw me as a lazy freeloader who did nothing but lounge around all day. He would boast to anyone who would listen about how he worked so hard while I did nothing. He lived like a king at home, enjoying a life even the gods would envy while belittling me, forcing me to depend on him. He also admired Jenna Monroe's professional capabilities, constantly praising her. Snapping back to reality, I suppressed my emotions and nodded repeatedly. Yes, I'm not satisfied. That's why we should finalize the divorce as soon as possible, so you can find a woman who fully depends on you. Sean thought I was jealous. A mocking smile crept onto his lips as he loosened his collar and spoke with indifference. "If you're so determined to get a divorce, then suit yourself. Just don't come crawling back regretting it later." He used the excuse of having work to leave, but before going, he handed me the divorce agreement to sign. When he saw the finalized agreement, his disbelief was clear. His eyes bore into mine, and his expression turned icy. His jaw tightened as he sneered. "So you've got some nerve." I smiled calmly right back at him. When he hesitated to sign, I smirked and teased. "What's the matter? Can't bear to part with me?" I deliberately paused before adding, "You're overestimating yourself." Sean's pride was unshakable, especially when it came to me. He'd never willingly take a loss. His hesitation wasn't about me, it was about the baby I carried. My taunts pushed him over the edge, and he signed the agreement on the spot, leaving no room to reconsider. Carefully placing the agreement into my bag, I reminded him, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Civil Affairs office." Before I could finish, the door slammed shut so hard it echoed. That was the last sound Sean made as he stormed out, clearly furious. Jenna's reappearance had caused us to argue about divorce countless times in the past, but because of pressure from our elders and the baby growing inside me, it never happened. Sean believed I wouldn't dare terminate the pregnancy, assuming my love for him was so deep that I wouldn't leave. That assumption made him act with impunity. After a simple lunch, I went to the hospital. By the time I left, the baby was gone. In my previous life, the child had been sensitive and insecure because of the unhappy marriage. Every time I brought up divorce, Sean would scare him by saying I didn't want him anymore. I gave in repeatedly, fearing he'd be hurt or mistreated. It was a mistake, one that led to more mistakes. By the time I truly saw Sean for who he was, my youth was long gone. I had no choice but to endure. Why should I step aside once he had achieved success, allowing him and Jenna to live happily ever after? As long as I didn't divorce him, I remained Mrs. Reed in name and status. Even if there was no love, there was still money and a comfortable life. My daughter would remain the sole heir to his wealth. But now, in this new life, I had personally severed that weak link. I only hoped that in his next life, my child would have a loving family. I grew up in a family with parents who truly cared for me, so I wouldn't suffer because of them. This was a time of economic growth and boundless opportunities. It was time for me to cut my losses and reclaim the bold and fearless Claire Reed I used to be. Sean didn't come home that night, likely unwilling to see me. The next morning, as I waited at the Civil Affairs office, I called him. He had just woken up, and I could hear a woman's soft laughter in the background. It was Jenna's voice. "Claire, can you stop causing trouble?" Sean's tone was tired. I pulled an all-nighter signing a major deal last night. I'm really exhausted right now. I took a deep breath and retorted mockingly. Exhausted? Looks like you've been busy in bed instead. The staff at the Civil Affairs office exchanged curious glances, clearly intrigued by the drama unfolding. Sean's patience snapped. He scoffed coldly and growled. Claire, aren't you just using the baby to manipulate me? You think I won't divorce you because of the kid, so you're stirring up trouble for attention, aren't you? I've given you enough respect because of the baby, but you're taking it too far. It's getting disgusting. Sean was so arrogant, so certain that everything revolved around him. He never reflected on his own behavior. Not wanting to drag this out, I replied calmly. What a shame, Sean. That baby you're talking about is gone. Yesterday at 3 p.m. to be exact. The line went silent, followed by Jenna's sharp pain scream. Sean must have pushed her aside because the next thing I knew, he was racing to the Civil Affairs office. He arrived half an hour later, reeking of smoke and alcohol, his eyes bloodshot and his expression twisted in rage. Claire, how could you? He demanded. I waved dismissively, stepping further away from him. Why wouldn't I? You're out there keeping a mistress, someone who once dumped you, no less. Compared to your shameless behavior, I'm nothing. I told you there's nothing going on. Sean snapped. I promoted Jenna because she's capable and qualified for the job. Why do you always have to assume the worst? He rubbed his temples, looking exasperated as if I were being unreasonable. Seeing some bystanders about to step in and mediate, I cut him off coldly. The factory housing you secretly rented to her, the lipstick stains on your shirts, your matching couple outfits. Tell me, Sean, which of these did I make up? Sean was momentarily stunned, but he quickly regained his composure, sneering again. So because of these so-called misunderstandings you killed my child? Claire, how could you be so cruel? As for Jenna, there's nothing to say. We're innocent. You're just too sensitive and making a big deal out of nothing. He spoke so matter-of-factly as if my pain and frustration were entirely baseless. But deep down I knew the truth. Even if Sean hadn't physically cheated yet, Jenna's calculated proximity and constant presence would ensure it was only a matter of time. He had long indulged her advances, rarely rejecting her attempts to curry favor. After all, she was the unattainable first love of his youth. Jenna Monroe's simpering affection only served to inflate his ego, making him feel invincible. Well then, you've misunderstood me completely, I said with a sharp laugh. You've already signed the divorce papers. What right do you have to expect me to bear your children? It's broad daylight. What sort of ridiculous daydream are you having? I pulled out the signed divorce agreement, laying it before him. Sean's face darkened as he realized the weight of what he'd done. He stared at the papers, stunned. This is your signature, I said coldly. Don't even think about denying it. You set me up, Sean exclaimed, glaring at me, though his tone betrayed a mixture of doubt and certainty. No, I simply woke up, I replied evenly. Do you really think that just because I carried your child, I should resign myself to a life of suffering, disrespect, and humiliation? That I deserve to be treated like a useless burden? Don't forget, I was once a clothing designer in the textile factory's pattern-making department. With commissions, I made over 100 yuan a month. Half of the funds you used to start your business came from me. And look what you've turned me into. How are you going to repay me? So you blame me? Sean's brows furrowed, his expression full of disbelief. Looking at him, still so blind to his faults, I suddenly felt exhausted. I handed the divorce documents to the staff, then turned to him and said quietly, how could I not blame you? You couldn't let go of Jim Monroe, yet you still married me, even when I was pregnant and sensitive, unable to eat and constantly overwhelmed. You stayed entangled with her. You even brought her into your company to flaunt in front of me. Don't you think you've gone too far, Sean? Even bullying someone has its limits. Unable to suppress my emotions any longer, I lowered my head and started to cry. The suffocating weight in my chest eased as the tears flowed. Sean froze for a moment at the sight of my tears, instinctively stepping forward, but when I backed away, his outstretched foot paused midair before retreating. After a long silence, I whispered, Hey Sean, let me go. You're so insistent on clinging to this, it's disgusting. Sean was always a proud man. After everything I'd said, there was no way he would persist further. He let out a cold laugh, his eyes boring into mine with venom. Fine, we'll get divorced. Only a coward wouldn't. The paperwork was processed quickly. Just 10 minutes later, with a divorce certificate in hand, Sean turned and walked away without a word. His face dark as a storm cloud. Standing outside the civil affairs office, I watched his figure retreat into the distance. Lowering my head, I let out a soft laugh, then turned and walked in the opposite direction. After the divorce, I received 50.00 yuan and the welfare housing unit where Jenna Monroe had been living. Though the thought of her having stayed there sickened me, keeping the property made more sense than taking cash. A few years ago, property prices in Canton skyrocketed, making it a lucrative investment. News of my divorce with Sean spread quickly throughout the textile factory. Jenna Monroe, still pretending to be oblivious, refused to move out of the apartment. Frustrated, I hired a few burly men to help her move. By help, I meant tossing all her belongings out. Stop! What are you doing? Jenna, dressed in a white blouse and a black pencil skirt, came rushing back. Seeing her belongings scattered all over the ground, she was furious. Don't touch my things. This is illegal. I'll call the police, she shouted, blocking the doorway to stop the men from entering. But they simply pushed her aside, ignoring her protests. Ma'am, step aside. We're just doing our job. You're the mistress, I said nonchalantly as I stepped out of the apartment, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. I'm not his mistress. Jenna shot back, her voice high-pitched and trembling. Her face flushed red as though she'd been gravely insulted. Sean and I are innocent. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? Give me a break, I retorted with a roll of my eyes. If you're not his mistress, then why are you living here for free? At my words, the crowd of onlookers began murmuring among themselves. So she really didn't pay anything? No wonder Claire divorced him. If the mistress moved in, how could she put up with it? Shoo! Stop talking. Sean's here, someone whispered, nudging their neighbor as Sean entered. The surrounding chatter died down. He looked haggard, with unshaven stubble and an overwhelming stench of alcohol and cigarettes. Was this really necessary? He asked, his tone defensive as he immediately took Jenna's side. Absolutely, I replied, my voice dripping with disdain. The thought of her living in my apartment made my skin crawl. Feeling insulted, Jenna seemed ready to lunge at me but was held back by Sean. He turned to look at me, his gaze lingering for a long moment before a wry smile spread across his face. Fine, he said finally. Have it your way. He then turned to Jenna, his voice soft and gentle. Jenna, I'll find you a new place to stay. Somewhere much better than this. Even as he spoke to her, his eyes flickered toward me, filled with some inexplicable challenge. Unwilling to engage with his madness, I turned my head and caught sight of Jenna blushing, her face tinged with a delicate pink as she smiled sweetly. Thank you, Sean, she said coyly. Without you, I don't know what I'd do. The two began flirting openly, their tone dripping with intimacy. I'd seen enough in my past life to be indifferent to it now. Shuddering with mock disgust, I sneered. Take it elsewhere. If you're going to be so nauseating, don't pollute my sight. Jenna was finally driven out with the broom, and Sean followed close behind. Before leaving, he shot me a look filled with complex emotions, though I couldn't care less. When news of my divorce with Sean spread, my parents immediately pressured me to reconcile with him. They threatened to disown me if I didn't. Their attitude was no different from how it had been in my previous life. Disagreements are inevitable between husband and wife. My mother scolded me, saying if everyone handled things the way you do, filing for divorce at the slightest conflict, wouldn't the world be in chaos? You're just too temperamental, Claire. She hovered around me, sighing heavily. Her persistence wore me down, and finally I snapped, my tone harsher than I intended. Mom, do you even know what Sean's been up to? He's still tangled up with his ex-jam. The moment she got divorced, he couldn't wait to run back to her. He's treated me so poorly. Why should I keep humiliating myself for his sake? That hasn't actually happened, has it? She countered quickly. Sean himself said he was just helping her out because she was going through a tough time. And haven't you been living comfortably since you got pregnant? You've been eating well, drinking well. He hasn't shorted you a single penny. You're already living better than most people, Claire. She sighed again and continued, "Sometimes in life you need to turn a blind eye to certain things. You don't have to make such a big deal out of everything." With a solemn face, she added, "Your father and I are getting old. In the future, the only ones you'll have to rely on are your child and Sean." But her expression was heavy, as though I were the one in the wrong. My father, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. His tone was gruff. "Marriage isn't a game, Claire. If there's a chance to reconcile, you should take it. That boy still cares about you, or he wouldn't have come to us and spoken to us so respectfully. He still sees us as his in-laws." Seeing that both of them had been completely charmed by Sean, I gave up on explaining and said firmly, "It's impossible. I've already terminated the pregnancy. There's no way I'll start over with him. Everyone knows that spilled water can't be retrieved. In my past life, I lacked the courage to stand my ground. I was always hesitant, overly considerate, and easily swayed by others. That's why I missed so many opportunities. If I made the same mistakes this time around, I truly deserve my fate." After I left my job due to the pregnancy, Sean began looking down on me, constantly comparing me to Jenna. He treated me like a kept woman, someone dependent on him for everything. But feeding me wasn't enough. He also wanted to support his ex, dreaming of keeping both his wife at home and his mistress outside. His ambitions were laughably grand. Because of the divorce, the neighbors treated me like a joke, but I didn't care. "Don't worry," I told my parents. "I'll be leaving Canton in the next couple of days. I'll visit during the new year. That way, you won't have to deal with any embarrassment on my account." After the divorce, I resolved to leave and start fresh in Jean City. It was the perfect way to cut ties with Sean and avoid any future entanglements. My parents and sister-in-law wouldn't have to put up with my disputes either. Distant aunt who had married into a family in Jean City, moving there wouldn't leave me entirely stranded. I bought a train ticket for the next morning and rented out the welfare apartment I had reclaimed. I told no one the exact time of my departure. Before leaving, I visited the textile factory one last time to purchase some of the latest clothing designs to sell in Jean City. I sought out my closest friend, Aine, at the factory. She was the only one who didn't try to stop me from leaving. "Ever since Sean made a fortune in business, everyone's been saying you're ungrateful for divorcing him, that you're incompetent for failing to hold on to your husband," she said, shaking her head. "But you were never meant for that kind of life." Her simple words gave me immense courage. She was right. I used to be fearless, willing to try anything. We agreed on a profit-sharing deal, and I asked her to help manage the rental of my apartment. Then I went to a newly opened supermarket nearby to pick up some supplies, only to unexpectedly run into Sean. He was buying cigarettes, surrounded by a group of his rowdy friends. "Sean, you're not seriously planning to marry Jenna Monroe, are you?" one of them teased. "The rumors about you two are all over the place." Sean froze for a moment, his hand tightening on the cigarette pack. When he recovered, his expression darkened and he snapped, "What nonsense are you spouting? There's nothing between us." Noticing Sean's foul mood, one of the others chimed in. "Come on, Sean, she's divorced. She's not even good enough for you." Hearing that, Sean's temper flared. He kicked the guy's shin and growled, "Who the hell are you calling a second-hand woman? Hey, don't get mad. I didn't mean it that way." The man quickly backtracked, sensing Sean's anger. "So you're planning to reconcile with CLA?" Sean didn't respond, but his silence spoke volumes. The man's eyes widened in shock. "Honestly, CLA's a great catch. She's beautiful, knows how to run a household. You two reconciling wouldn't be a bad idea. I heard she's not working right now. Maybe this is the perfect time to win her back." Before Sean could say anything, another guy scoffed. "Win her back? Don't spoil her. Women get spoiled too easily, and then they'll walk all over you." Sean lit a cigarette, his expression cold. "Exactly," he said with a sneer. "She'll come crawling back to me once she's had her fill of hardship. I've got all the time in the world to wait." After paying for his cigarettes, Sean and his friends left, their conversation continuing as they walked away. I stepped out from the shadows, a mocking smile on my lips. The next morning, I packed my bags and left for the train station. After several days and nights of travel, I finally arrived in Gone City. With my aunt's help, I rented a small house in her neighborhood and started selling goods at a local market. Though running a stall was exhausting, Jean City offered plenty of opportunities. Southern clothes and accessories were in high demand, and my inventory usually sold out. In 2 weeks, once I started turning a profit, I called Aileen to ask her to pick out more trendy items and ship them to me by train. Hearing how well the clothes were selling, she was thrilled for me. After wrapping up our business talk, Aileen suddenly shifted the conversation, her tone light and gossipy. "Claire, have you heard about Sean and Jenna?" Caught off guard by the mention of their names, I paused for a moment. During this busy and fulfilling time of my life, I had rarely thought about the past, either my previous life or my old grievances. After all, one must live in the present. Having been granted a second chance, I couldn't afford to dwell on the painful memories of my past life. Lowering my eyes, I replied disinterestedly, "No, what about them?" Seeing my response, Eileen's curiosity only grew. She said excitedly, "After you left, Jenna started pulling out all the stops to become the real Reed, shamelessly throwing herself at Sean. But for some reason, Sean remained indifferent to her. And then guess what? Jenna tried drugging him." "Drugging?" I echoed in surprise, looking up. "Yes, she drugged him, but it backfired spectacularly. Sean fired her on the spot and ended up in the hospital because of whatever she gave him. Jenna didn't just lose her job. Her reputation is completely ruined. She's hiding at home, too ashamed to show her face." Aileen paused before adding, "By the way, Sean's company has been shifting its focus recently. I heard he's planning to expand into Jean City. I'm not sure who he's connected with there, but if you want to avoid him, you should be careful." "Thanks, Aileen." I hung up the phone and let out a long sigh. Sean's move was troubling. Knowing how goal-oriented he was, I couldn't help but assume the worst, that he had found out my whereabouts through my parents. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't let go of me. Was it pride or some twisted sense of ownership? This winter in Jean City was particularly harsh, with snow blanketing the streets. I had shifted to selling the season's most popular items, down jackets and padded coats. Not wanting to endure lectures from relatives, I decided not to return to Canton for the new year. Instead, I wired 300 yuan to my parents for the holiday and stayed in Jean City. On New Year's Day, my great-aunt, who loved her sophisticated lifestyle, insisted on dressing me up. She put me in a fitted gray turtleneck sweater, a black overcoat, dark blue jeans, and short boots. My hair was tied up simply, revealing a sliver of my pale neck. With a touch of light makeup and pearl stud earrings in place, my great-aunt beamed with satisfaction. "You're in your prime right now," she said. "Don't waste all this beauty. If I were younger, I'd make sure to dress up every day, not like you, always in sportswear. It's such a waste. You've always been fashionable," I teased as I wrapped a scarf around my neck. She truly had a great sense of style, and I had to admit that her efforts made me look much more polished. I ran into Sean outside a clothing store after being inspired by my great-aunt's advice. I had gone shopping and ended up buying several outfits. As I exited the store carrying my purchases, I was suddenly confronted by his cold, piercing gaze. The chill in the air seemed to intensify as he strode up to me and grabbed my wrist tightly. No matter how much I struggled, he wouldn't let go. Sean's eyes scanned me from head to toe, and his lips curled into a cold sneer. "Dressed up like this, do you have someone in mind?" he said, smiling so brightly. "Funny how the moment I show up, you look like you've seen something disgusting." His gaze was sharp and predatory, as though he wanted to tear me apart. Fearing I might provoke him further, I stopped resisting and stood still, waiting for him to regain his composure. After a while, Sean seemed to calm down slightly. His grip on my wrist loosened, but his gaze stayed fixed on mine. "Claire," he said, his tone uncharacteristically soft. "I regret it. I regret divorcing you." His voice lowered further. "I don't care about the baby anymore. If we get back together, you can decide whether you want kids or not. And if you want to work, I'll fully support you." Hearing such words from Sean was nothing short of miraculous. In my past life, he had always dismissed my ambitions, even scoffing when I invested my earnings in a tea shop. To him, my aspirations were nothing but signs of disobedience. I averted my gaze, suppressing the anger boiling inside me. Finally, I said, "Sean, we're divorced. We're nothing to each other now. You're not the kind of man who can't move on. You should let go." But I regret it, Sean insisted, his voice strained. Let's start over, please. I know I've made mistakes, but I've never betrayed you. Jenna was just me being stupid, feeding my ridiculous vanity. I don't care about her anymore. I fired her. I promise she'll never bother you again. I married you because I loved you, not for any other reason. I stayed silent for a moment before meeting his eyes. My voice was calm, almost detached. Sean, regret doesn't matter anymore because I don't love you. A marriage without love is nothing but a hollow shell. I've already endured over 20 years of a widow-like marriage. I won't do it again. Just then a warm voice called out from behind me. Claire. I turned to see James Yuan standing at the corner of the store with his 4-year-old daughter. Yeah, holding a stick of candied hawthorn. Daddy, is that Auntie? The little girl asked in her sweet, childish voice as she broke into a run toward me. James quickly reached out to stop her. The sight of James and his daughter brought a flicker of hostility to Sean's eyes, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. So this is why you're rejecting me, Claire? For second-hand goods like him. Sean's impulsive words came out without restraint. You're really willing to be someone's stepmother? How pathetic. I took a deep breath and tilted my head slightly, my voice cutting yet resolute. You're absolutely right. I'd rather be someone else's stepmother and have children with another man than endure this again. I will never bear your child. Sean's icy, sinister gaze bored into me, but I responded with a faint smile. My tone was unbothered. My words were calculated to cut deep, to hit the most sensitive nerve he had, and they did. When I felt his grip on my arm loosen slightly, I pried his fingers off one by one and shoved his hand away forcefully. The walk back was awkward, tension lingering in the air. After a moment, I decided to break the silence and explain. That was my ex-husband back there. He's a bit unstable, so I said those things to get rid of him. Don't think too much about it, okay? I tapped my forehead with an apologetic smile, feeling a bit embarrassed. James Yuan, ever composed, smiled gently. I didn't think much of it. Our meeting had been serendipitous. I'd first met him because of his daughter. Yeah, it wasn't until later that I learned he was a university professor and one of the most accomplished young men in the area. James had a scholarly, gentlemanly demeanor, his every gesture steeped in the elegance of an intellectual. He was tall, well-built, and attractive. If not for his ex-wife's insistence on divorcing him to pursue opportunities abroad, his family could have remained blissfully intact. Lost in thought, I didn't notice James looking hesitant beside me. It wasn't until Yaya ran off to buy knitting needles, her cheerful laughter echoing in the alley, that James stopped and turned to me. Sila, he began, his voice hesitant. What you said earlier. Before he could finish, I exclaimed, Oh, it's snowing again. I stretched out my hand to catch the snowflakes, marveling at their cold touch but unwilling to withdraw. You know, I only saw snow after moving here. It's so poetic, isn't it? A vast white blanket. It feels like a dream. Blinking, I grinned and shifted the conversation. By the way, I'm moving soon. I've bought a shop with living quarters on Han Street and plan to start my business there. Aside from visiting family, I probably won't be around much. I gestured toward Yaya in the distance and added, She's a sweet girl, but you'll need to keep a close eye on her. There are so many dangers out there nowadays. James, sharp as ever, understood what I was implying. He looked away, his gaze falling on Yaya, and forced a small smile. Then let me wish you success in advance. Thank you, I replied softly. I walked over to Yaya, knelt down, and slipped a red envelope into her coat pocket before saying my goodbyes. Returning to my great-aunt's courtyard, I finally let out a breath of relief. She was reclining in her rocking chair, listening to the radio. Hearing me come in, she turned her head and smiled. Did you have a good time today? She asked. Just now, Mrs. Lee stopped by and mentioned seeing you walking home with James from the neighboring courtyard. What's going on with you two? Before she could say more, I quickly interjected. There's nothing going on. We just happened to run into each other. Besides, Ye was there too. My overly defensive tone made her sigh. Someone who's divorced, James, would be a great match for you. Sure, he has a 4-year-old daughter, but Yaya is a sweet, well-mannered child and she adores you. You wouldn't have to worry about getting along with her. I've lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. I know the Yuan family well. His parents are reasonable people, and James himself has good character. You're a woman, Claire. There's no need to be so stubborn. You should give it some thought. I knew she meant well. Most people's views in this era were still quite conservative, nothing like the open-mindedness of 20 years later. And she was right. Yaya was indeed a lovely child. But the thought of becoming a stepmother didn't sit well with me. Not wanting to sound too harsh, I wrapped my arm around her and spoke earnestly. Even if James and his family are wonderful, I can't force myself into something that doesn't feel right for me. She looked puzzled, so I continued more directly. If I were to marry James, no matter how much Yaya likes me now, there would inevitably be friction. Balancing our relationship wouldn't be easy, and I doubt I could compete with a child for his attention. Besides, I'm not the self-sacrificing type. I have no interest in becoming a stepmother. Raising children is hard enough when they're your own. Raising someone else's is even harder. And then there's Yaya's mother. She's only abroad. What happens if she comes back one day? How would James and Yaya treat her? Could they let go of her? And where would that leave me? I've had enough of competing with someone's first love or ex-wife. It's exhausting. My great-aunt sighed as if to continue persuading me, but I rested my chin on my hand and said seriously, remarrying is always complicated. Marry someone stronger, and it feels like being absorbed into their life. Marry someone weaker and it feels like you're settling. Auntie, I'm a businesswoman. I know how to calculate costs. That's why I've never considered remarriage. Marriage isn't the only path for women to live fulfilling lives. I no longer needed marriage to validate my worth. I had money, property, intelligence, and most importantly, I wasn't lacking in love. In the end, my great-aunt gave up trying to persuade me. She could see that I was living a fulfilling and happy life, one no longer tied to the mundane worries of domestic life. After that conversation, I began expanding my business, transforming my modest clothing trade into a full-fledged enterprise. My ventures grew larger and more successful, attracting significant attention, including, unfortunately, from Sean. Sean reappeared in my life, persistently trying to win me back. But no matter what tactics he used, drunken confessions of love, emotional manipulation, I treated him like the clown he was. The scars he had left on me were real, and while they might have healed, their marks remained. I wasn't one for mending broken mirrors. I preferred the kind of karmic justice where the wheel of fortune kept turning until the bitter end. Why should I forgive him just because he apologized with teary eyes? Why should I pretend nothing had happened when my cold indifference became too much for him to bear? Sean changed tactics, opting for a more indirect approach, lingering on the periphery of my life. Eventually, I earned enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I bought a villa in a quiet third-tier city, complete with a large garden, and retreated into a peaceful retirement. I effectively disappeared from Sean's reach. As long as I didn't leave my home, there was no way for him to continue his harassment. So I ignored Sean for 20 years. When he was 45, Sean was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. By the time he was lying on his deathbed, barely clinging to life, his family couldn't help but call me, but I didn't answer, not even when the doctor declared him dead. As I'd once promised, I never forgave him. In the previous life side story, when news broke that I had fallen down the stairs and died on the spot, Sean and our daughter Anna rushed home. In the dimly lit room, Anna saw Sean clutching my lifeless body in despair. "Claire, stop pretending. Isn't this what you wanted? For me to come back? I'm here now. How much longer are you going to throw this tantrum?" Sean's voice was filled with anger and denial. "If you hadn't been so stubborn, so indifferent to me, I wouldn't have used Jenna to provoke you." Unable to bear his grotesque display of guilt and self-pity, Anna pushed him away and shielded my body from his touch. "My mom is dead," she spat, her voice filled with disdain. "Who are you putting on this act for?" Her words cut through the air like a knife. Just like my mom always said, "You're pathetic." Tears welled up in Anna's eyes as memories of the past flooded her mind. All she ever wanted was respect from you as her husband, but what did you do? You spent your time whispering sweet nothings with your so-called soulmate. Don't even try to say it wasn't intentional. You broke her, Sean. Anna's voice cracked as she continued. "If it weren't for me, if she hadn't been worried about how you and Jenna would treat me, she would have left long ago to live a life without you. She yanked off the jade bracelet from her wrist and thrust it toward Sean, revealing a faint scar. This is from when she had postpartum depression after giving birth to me. She tried to end it all, and where were you? Off dismissing her feelings as hysterics, calling her unpresentable. She told you she wasn't well, but you never listened. All of you bullied her until she broke. Anna broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. When Sean tried to approach, she lashed out, kicking and hitting him in fury. After my burial, Sean turned to alcohol. 3 years later, physically and mentally drained, he was forced to hand over the company to Anna. With no other options, the board reluctantly accepted her leadership. Anna proved her worth immediately. She cut ties with Jenna's company, citing hazardous formaldehyde levels in their materials as a reason. The reason for terminating all contracts without Sean's protection was that Jenna's fledgling business collapsed. Employees revolted, salaries went unpaid, and clients vanished. Desperate, Jenna turned to Sean for help, but before he could intervene, Anya stormed into the room and slapped Jenna across the face. "Guess what? I'm the head of the Reed Corporation now," Anya said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Aren't you the independent woman who didn't need a man? What happened to your girl boss energy? Can't manage without him now, can you?" Before Jenna could respond, Anya pointed at Sean and sneered. "You want to marry him? Go ahead. Just so you know, he's nothing but a powerless old man now. Oh, and thanks to my mom's years of cooking, he's also infertile. A perfect match for you." Her biting words left Jenna stunned and Sean bitterly silent. For the first time, he realized just how pathetic his life had become. "You're all talk," Anya continued coldly. "Believing you was more foolish than believing pigs can fly. Anna never married. Inspired by my independence, she chose to have a child through artificial insemination, raising them on her own. Sean, broken and abandoned, spent his remaining years in the villa I had once called home, but he was forbidden from entering my room. Anya made sure of it, declaring, 'You don't deserve to taint her memory.' Sean begged to be buried next to me when his time came, but Anya refused. 'You've already disgusted her in life. Do you think I'd let you continue in death?' Sean died full of regret, his soul burdened by the life he wasted.